have a friend of mine who moved up, he and his wife. This baby was in tune not 15 minutes ago. Moved up from down in the Jordan country, and he wanted to go cowboy, and he was raised on a ranch. But everybody, you got a big ranch, and then you got a big family, and sooner or later, the youngest one's got to go out and find his own ranch. And brought up his wife and his kid. Now they have a couple kids, and now the kids are out of high school. I don't know where time goes. And I don't have any kids myself, so I rely on everybody else to have them, so they remind me how old I'm getting. I wrote him this song. Give him a horse and saddle and the wide rolling plains, a cabin with his gal by his side. Oh, it don't take much to make a cowboy a king. All he needs is a place to ride. Sweet dreams of someday owning, oh, a little place he can call his own. He'll have a grin as big as all of Montana when he climbs on his pony and rides. On sagebrush flats, not far from the river, where rim rocks reach for the sky, he can see corrals and a fine herd of cattle with his brand hanging proudly on their side. Dreaming about it drives him crazy, though he knows in times dreams will all come true. So until that day he'll be more than contented to climb on his pony and ride. Sweet dreams of someday owning a little place he can call his own. He'll have a grin as big as all of Montana when he climbs on his pony and rides. No, it don't take much to make a cowboy a king. All he needs is a place to ride. There you go. Thank you.
He'll be back with a little dinner music once he's had a little dinner himself. We don't want him to get tired out yet. It'd be a long evening otherwise. But as I said, just want to talk a little bit. We've got Consolidated here this evening, and they're broadcasting the second annual Ag Livestock Forum on Consolidated here in Dickinson. So a big thanks to Ron and Trace for doing that and the whole crew at Consolidated. The Chamber Ag Committee throughout the year does a lot of different activities. We do this event, of course, also help with any other events with the college with a little livestock or judging contest that they do. We usually provide some judges in the spring of the year with the National Ag Week and the first day of spring. Distribute some flyers and information to grade school kids throughout the area about the importance of agriculture and agriculture in action, to try to give a little bit of extra education to our youth, and then also support 4-H throughout the year. And we also do what's called Banquet in the Field, which is scheduled for July 14th this year, and I believe that's our third year with that event. The Banquet in the Field takes place actually at somebody's farm, and we've got crops growing around us, and all kinds of agriculture happening right in the summer. So it's an opportunity for people that normally don't get to a farm or ranch to go out and enjoy an evening and enjoy a great meal and a lot of different foods and things with the Banquet in the Field. Other events to help with Dickinson Research Extension Center throughout the summer. Rough Rider Days Fair and Expo with the 4-H premium sale provide a a meal for folks that are usually kind of tired out after 4 days of 4-H, and get through that premium sale, and they get a little send-off with a meal on that evening. And we try to help and fill in areas of need for education, whether it's for youth or adult, and try to help out agriculture in our area any way we can. And that's through a bunch of great people that volunteer their time and their talents throughout the course of the year. We also have the Ag Committee sponsors. We've got a great group of sponsors. I want to recognize them this evening as you look at this plaque. People that have taken, many of these sponsors have been with us a lot of years, helping spread the story of agriculture and grow it right here in southwest North Dakota. American Bank Center is a sponsor, Ag Week Magazine, Choice Bank, Dakota Bank, Dakota Outdoor Advertising, Dakota Community Bank and Trust, Dickinson State University, Farm Credit Services, along with Nodak Mutual Insurance Company, Stark County Farm Bureau, Rough Rider Electric Cooperative, Southwest Grain, Runnings Farm and Fleet, Stockman's Livestock Exchange, along with the Stark and Billings Soil Conservation Districts, Western Cooperative Credit Union, Wells Fargo Bank, West Plains Incorporated, JP Frame Shop, and Western Edge Gallery. All people that help support ag events through the Chamber of Commerce here in Dickinson throughout the year. So a big thanks to everybody that's mentioned on there. We'll have our meal at this time, of course, and then we'll have DW come back up for a little bit more entertainment. It's his choice, so he's going to either do some poetry and some music, or some poetry and some music. So we're going to have DW Groethe back for a bit, and then we'll go to our main speaker this evening, Curt Pate. And Curt will also field questions throughout the evening, so put your thinking caps on and be ready, because when Curt's up speaking, he will be able to answer questions too. And we look forward to the information that he's going to share with us tonight. And big thanks to everybody that attended tonight. Sometimes it's kind of hectic, kind of busy. Take a couple hours out of a Thursday night isn't in the cards, but thanks to everybody that came in this evening. And big thanks to Austin Bepley, Megan Clausen, and then also to Executive Director Christina Jorgensen for the time that they worked on this event. It always seems like you turn around and the next event's in front of you, and these guys do a great job working throughout the year on a lot of different events, and they help the Ag Committee do a lot of the things we do in a timely fashion, so thanks to those folks. And right now, I'm going to take a little break. We're going to give you a few minutes to enjoy some supper, and DW will come back up.
It wouldn't be a chamber event if I didn't try to steal the microphone from Mike any point in the night, so I had to do it right now, so I had a time to give a little plug to the Chamber of Commerce about some upcoming events that we have for the Chamber in general. The mission and purpose of the Chamber, as we all know, is to promote a progressive business environment in the Dickinson community. I'm getting feedback from somewhere. And really just bridging the community and business together in the city of Dickinson and making this a really great place to live. So we do that one of the ways through a number of events that we host throughout the years, such as at Livestock Forum, Banquet and Field that Mike just talked about, which are really great events. If you haven't heard about them, check out the Chamber website, the Facebook pages, get involved in them because they're really great events. They're really cool to go out and see and just get some information. Some of the other events that we have coming up in the next couple month or so, the Chamber of Commerce and Dale Carnegie of North Dakota and Minnesota partner very closely together. So for your businesses in the Dickinson community, we are hosting a Uncovering Leadership Blind Spots seminar that is $49 and is open to everyone in the Dickinson community. So it's a very good program, the Dale Carnegie course. I've gone through it myself. It really is a building public speaking leadership, so it's a very good event. Make sure you check it out on the Chamber website. We have our next business after hours on March 17th, and that is going to be at Venture Homes' new location out by Menards. Yes, thank you, Bobby. Out by Menards on March 17th at the Venture Homes. And then our next biggest event of the year is going to be our annual banquet and Chamber Choice Awards. That is happening on March 31st at the Astoria Hotel. Nominations are open for local businesses, so if you want to nominate a local business or own a local business, check out our Facebook page under the event tab, and go ahead and nominate your local business. We are also looking for nonprofit and best young professional place to work in Dickinson. So definitely check out our Facebook page, give us a call at the chamber to learn more about events that we have coming up or just general events having in the city. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
This is a little song that I wrote. I'm back, yeah, he's back, DW, just like it's spelled. Some people wonder where I'm from. I was born and raised in Williston, but I tell people I moved over to Montana back in 91, and that's since when I started cowboying, because everybody needs fence fixings. Everybody needs somebody to go out and help shoot cows, do cow work, and you know, it was the smartest move I ever did. And I'm not known for really smart moves. So a gal I was dating with at the time, this is about 95. Okay, because you're my kind of crowd, we all know what Carhartts are. And we all know that they take each, I don't care what they make out of it, they put enough starch in there to outlive the pants. I mean, you can't get it out there. By the time you're done, you've got them so they're comfortable to wear. You've got patches from 11 different kinds of material on there covering, because you refuse to get a new pair because there's so dang much starch. Well, hers went out about the same time mine did, and we were both ruined the fact that we're going to have to buy new Carhartt insulated coveralls for winter work. And I came up with this song for us, for her, basically. It's called the Carhartt Song, another brilliant title. And that's about all there is to it. If there's anybody in here that's into classical music, you might recognize the melody of the chorus, because I stole it from Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. Seriously, it's one of his waltzes. And I figured he wouldn't care, because he's dead. Them big city gals are natural at turning good cowboys around, dressed in their big city finery. They'll waltz a good hand to the ground. Well, I know, 'cause I've been there myself, boys. Please take a word from the wise. There's far more to beauty, I'm certain, far more than what meets the eye. Consider the gal that you're hitched to. She'll be there when you make a stand. Oh, maybe them bibs ain't from Perry. Who cares? She's one heck of a hand. My sweetheart's the gal in the Carhartts. She's a one of a kind of gal. Helps with the cabin in springtime and gathers the herd in the fall. There's no one I'd rather depend on. And though them bibs don't look like much, underneath that brown duck is most of my luck, and I'll love her till the day that I die. Ah, it's not that she looks like that always, just when there's work to be done. Whenever we can, we pull slack time, and we're out to go dance and have fun. She'll put on a snug pair of blue jeans, a shirt with some frills on the side, and she'll outclass them big city sweethearts as across that old dance floor we glide. My sweetheart's the gal in the Carhartts. She's a one-of-a-kind kind of gal. Helps with the cabin in springtime and gathers the herd in the fall. There's no one I'd rather depend on. And though them bibs don't look like much, underneath that brown duck is most of my luck. And I'll love her till the day that I die. Underneath that brown duck is a gal that can chuck square bales with the best of the guys. Thank you. I wrote this song, this next song. It's called Rodeo Sweetheart. Oh, when this little girl was 9 years old, she was a ranch girl. Her folks are good friends of mine. We were in the store that's on, Bainville's got this little welcome stop place on the highway, eatery and a gas station. And this is after my second or third CD came out, and she said, I really like listening to your new CD. But I said, Lindsay, well, thanks a lot, you know, because I gave one to her folks. She goes, and I'd like to sing along, but my mom won't let me. And I go, why not? Well, you put some words in there that I can't say. You know, there's no real dirty words, but I know her mom, and yeah. So I said, well, how about just a dang or a heck? She goes, no, I can't say those either. So here's where being single and never having kids does not pay off. I said, I tell you what, I will write a song for you for the next CD that doesn't have any of those words in it. And she just smiled and she said, oh, that's great, that's great. And I thought that was the end of it. Kids don't forget. Why didn't somebody bother telling me? And every time I saw her, we'd be, you know, either out help giving them a hand, or we'd just run across each other in town or up to the high school or something. She goes, D.W., how's my song coming along? And I did what all adults do, I lied. I said, oh, come right along, I'm just zipping. One day she asked me, what's the title? And I said, Rodeo Sweetheart. And I knew I was screwed. She had a grin, and I had to have a song. So that's the song. Any barrel raiders here? She turns her world round a clover leaf, sparkling eyes, smiling sweet, and there's no way you'll stand a chance. She don't fool with no romance. She'll make her ride, she'll load and go, running down the road to a rodeo. What she loves most is a winning time, and flying like a zephyr with the devil behind, heading to a rodeo down the line. Well, she got her pony, oh, midnight, they hit the road, everything's just right. Dreaming dreams of the NFR. If you want her love, you won't get far. 'Cause she'll make her ride, she'll load and go, running down the road to a rodeo. What she loves most is a winning time, and flying like a zephyr with the devil behind, heading to a rodeo down the line. The day may come, she'll pull back, maybe cut some cowboy slack, but until then, don't never mind, 'cause she runs her world on rodeo time. She'll make her ride, she'll load and go, running down the road to a rodeo. What she loves most is a winning time, and flying like a zephyr with the devil behind, heading to a rodeo down the line. She'll make her ride, she'll load and go, running down the road to a rodeo. What she loves most is a winning time, and then flying like a zephyr with the devil behind, heading to a rodeo down the line. Thank you. We, those of us who get into our, somehow or other stumbled into being cowboy poets, even though we were that all along. Rodney Nelson's one. He and I traveled down the road a lot together. But we kind of car hop. Like I would drive from here to Weevil and hop in with friends, and we go from there. This trip in particular, we went to Casper, and then after Casper, we met people who came home from South Dakota, grabbed their car, and went down to Kanab, Utah. And the lady who owned this car was a ranch wife who lived right on the border of Nebraska. She was in Arizona, though, so she was coming up to get her car, and we were all coming back in her car. That's how this thing works. So this trip from Kanab, Utah, we come back up, and it's called the Bunny Poem. That's about it right there. I guess you don't really need any other, because it's all true pretty much, except the car wasn't a Chevrolet, it was a Buick, and I could never rhyme Buick. Didn't rhyme Chevrolet for that matter. But anyway, the Bunny Poem. Driving through the midnight hour, clipping down the trail, we was headed back from Utah on the last legs of our tail. 20 hours riding hard from down the old Southwest. Why, we was more than plenty tired, and our brains was craving rest. Then we finally reached the Black Hills, and the end was nigh in sight. So we caught ourselves a second wind and flew back in the night. Now from Belfouche up to Bowman, that's a mighty lonesome haul. Ain't much to keep you company, besides that haunting coyote call. Oh, the moon was full upon us. The prairie was aglow, when out the corner of my vision come a scene that froze my soul. There was bunnies in the ditches, 'neath the sagebrush, in the air. There was millions, there was billions, there was bunnies everywhere. Their beady little eyeballs was glaring black as tar. I could smell the trouble brewing when the first one rammed the car. Suicidal little buggers was on a lemming kick. I thought, even for a bunny, this is getting pretty sick. Well, they careened out on the highway, not a care for life and limb. Why, we was turning furry bunnies into prairie cherubim. Oh, they wrapped around the axles. They gummed up in the tires. Parts flipped up on the engine on a manifolds and wires. Others whacked against the floorboards after kissing that old bumper. Now I know why Disney called old Bambi's bunny buddy Thumper. It was bowling in the Badlands with a She-Rike at every throw, a bunny Armageddon in a P.T. Barnum show, till at the last they started thinning down as Ludlow slipped away. And we crossed that old Dakota line in one bunged-up Chevrolet. I breathed an everlasting sigh, knowing that from here, all we had to worry about was open range and deer. There you go, the Bunny Poem. My father was raised on a farm. He was born in 1917, but they had, a few head of cattle, and they had pretty much like all farmsteads did. This was way up North Dakota. 6 miles up the Granora Road, if anybody's been there. Anyway, ta-da. And after he passed on, everything rolled over to my mom, and my mom kept saying, "Would you get some of this stuff out of here?" Now I know exactly what she means. She passed away 4 years later, so I ended up being the executor. And if you've got a kid that you want to get even with from the grave, you make them the executor, okay? Just a little tip there, had nothing to do with cowboy poetry. But anyway, my father was the superintendent of the county highway department for Williams County for like 30 years. And when he retired, most everything on his desk belonged to the county. He had just a little cigar box filled with a few extra pens and a little pocket tablet. I carry those things around all the time. I got it from him. So I thought, well, I can use that, and all the pens are dyed. I threw everything else out. And then I didn't look at it for a couple of years, and one day I needed a book, so I opened it up, and it's Culvert Company. And on the first page, must have been a slow day, because he'd written down the names of all the horses that he had, that he'd grown up with. And it was just neat. And I remembered the stories for, because he used to tell us stories about these horses all the time. But I couldn't put the story to the horse. So about 12, 13 years later, I was sitting down one night just coming up with an idea for a poem, and this came out. And it had been waiting a long time. It's called My Father's Horses. It must have been a day for peace and reverie when my father took a pencil in his hand and scribed upon his notebook all the horses that he'd had when growing up in West Dakota land. I can see him sitting, thoughtful, soft smile in his eyes as the ponies pranced before him once again. Then he jotted each one down in a slow and careful hand. Sometimes horses can count right up with kin. Toby, Frank, and Muggins, Daisy 1 and Daisy 2. His memory felt a breeze that stirred their manes. Charlie, Chub, and Pearl found their way up to the front and back once more upon the dusty plains. Prince 1 and 2 and Mike come loping lightly into view. Oh, he penned their memories gentle on the page, waiting and a-thinking he's a-missing just a few when Queen and Maynard nickering through the sage. Then finally, down the draw come Thunder, Buck, and Bill, a-flying like the wind, and they was one. And then he eased back in his chair, contemplating all that's there. His gathering of the old bunch was all done. Yeah, it must have been a day of peace and reverie in his office at a desk of metal gray, when the old man made a tally, gathering up his cavy one last time before they slipped away. There you go. Thank you. I never do a gig, even sometimes they only want 15 minutes, 10 minutes, just something to fill in. And I never do one without doing some of the old ones, the classics. The ones that opened the door to people like me and John, you know, who is now an officially sad member of the Cowboy poetry world. That's all right. Give him a hand. He's good. He's come a long way in the last few years. He's a friend. So, here's the song I do. I sang this when I was an itty-bitty kid. Pretty much everybody sang this song when they were an itty-bitty kid. And if you want to sing along in the chorus, that's fine and dandy. If you don't know the words to the chorus, Homeland Security's looking for you. Okay, leave it at that. I was out walking one morning for pleasure. I spied a cowpuncher riding along. His hat was throwed back, his spurs was jingling, and as he approached, he was singing this song. Whoopee-tie-yi-o, get along, little doggy, it's your misfortune and not my own. Whoopee-tie-yi-o, get along, little doggy, you know that Wyoming will be your new home. Okay, there are some lips are moving. This is a good sign. See, you're kind of up a creek here because they got the lights on. I can see. Early in the springtime, we round up the doggies. We mark them, we brand them, we bob off their tails. Load the chuck wagon and round up the cavvy. And roll the little doggies out on the long trail. Whoopee-tie-yi-o, get along, little doggy, it's your misfortune and not my own. Whoopee-tie-yi-o, get along, little doggy, you know that Wyoming will be your new home. There's 47 verses to this. I'm only going to do one more, though, I promise you. It's a threat. Well, some men go up the long trail for pleasure, but that's where they get it most awfully wrong. For you'll never know the troubles they give us as we go rolling the doggies along. Whoop-tie-yi-o, get along, little doggy, It's your misfortune and not my own. Whoop-tie-I-O, get along, little doggy. You know that Wyoming will be your new home. There you go. Tell you. This is a poem I wrote. The way I wrote them all. You can fess up to these things after a while. Okay, well, how many people have had to deal with feed trucks? You know, this describes the one we had on the ranch I worked at for about 13 years full time. And yeah, feed truck blues. Every ranch has at least one of these. They say it used to be a Ford. And when new was so adored, it was washed, even polished once a week. But as time went flitting by, a Chevy caught their eye, and the pickup's future went from bright to bleak. Because they gave it to the kids, who put the darn thing on the skid so fast the new tranny was a must. And that's the last they sunk a buck into the upkeep of this truck. And since that day, the whole thing's gone to rust. And it was so wise designated till we were delegated to air the rubber, fill the thing with feed. So we committed the inflation with somewhat less than full elation, for we knew this sorry dog was our new steed. Not that chrome is on the list of things that will be missed when you're graining cows at 20-odd below, but you can tell how much abuse a truck has had in general use when holes appear and road begins to show. The tailgate, that Hummer's history, where it is, remains a mystery. So a tarp strap pulls the sides in somewhat square. Just pile the feet up toward the cab and not the back. And better grab and check that wheezing spare. Because if you get to where you're going and have a flat, you'll soon be known a reason why so many cowboys cuss. Still, the darn thing sort of works if you ignore the jumps and jerks. And really, hot wiring ain't that big a fuss. Of course, there's one thing you can't fake, and that's the total lack of brake. So you learn to park upside or by a hill, kind of ease her down some slow, back and forth, you rock and roll till finally the darn thing's standing still. And another sorry thing leaves me quietly smoldering, almost willing to swap my ticket to St. Peter. I can live without the lights, the blinkers, dims, and brights, but I swear I'd sell my soul for one good heater. Soon you'll gaze through bloodshot eyes upon a sea of Arctic pies, all about a foot or so apart. And you got to ferret that old truck across that frozen jumbled muck. Well, that's enough to crush a humble cowboy's heart. And heart you're going to need when you're delivering that feed, because her last new shocks blew out in '84. So grit your teeth and duck your head. You got to grain them quadrupeds, lingering restless off on yonder shore. The truly sad part of this outfit is when it's finally give about its final grieving, heaving, gasping breath, some disastrous twist of fate makes it all rejuvenate for one more season, deftly dodging death. Yes, it's a skiddy situation to have to drive this compilation of duct tape, wire, rubber, bolts, and rust. And I confess I have these prayers I send daily straight upstairs. Lord, let this poor old suffering junk heap self-combust. Amen. Got time for a couple more? Can I do a couple more? I'm looking at Mike. I don't want to trounce on. Okay. Here's a song I wrote. Coffee is my one true addiction. Oh, okay, so I got others, but still. And one night I was sitting alone, and this song just sort of come out. Oddly enough, it's called the Coffee Song. We was somewhere in Wyoming, halfway through an all-night drive, tired and wired from too much fun when we seen this roadside dive. So we pulls on over and we strolls on in for eggs and a cup of brew. But when the waitress poured a slug of their best, I said, honey, that just won't do. I ain't sure what's up, but through the coffee in this cup, I can read this outfit's name. This here watered down, can barely even call it brown's a monumental crying shame. I say, the Lord be praised and glory be. This is something I never seen. How could someone get so much mileage out of one little old coffee bean? I said, darling, I like my coffee lethal. I like my coffee black. I like it so's that first big swig hits like a heart attack. I like it when you need a knife to cut it. Whew, that's a fact. Is the kind that said will wake the dead. I like my coffee black. Well, it's kind of hard to describe the look on her face as my tirade flew and grew, and in spite of my talking and cowboy squawking, nothing I said got through. Her eyes got kind of squirrely, glazed like in a dream, and when I finally run out of breath, she smiled. Sugar or cream? Ha! I like my coffee lethal. I like my coffee black. I like it so's that first big swig, it's like a heart attack. I like it when you need a knife to cut it, that's a fact. Oh, the kind that said will wake the dead. I like my coffee black. Well, needless to say, we drove away, our appetites unsated. Didn't get no eggs, no toast, no ham, and was totally uncaffeinated. So with eyes half propped, ready to drop, we barely made her back. And I'll tell you true, next trip I do, going to bring along a thermos of black coffee. Cowboy coffee, 'cause I like my coffee lethal. I like my coffee black. I like it so just first big swig hits like a heart attack. I like it when you need a knife to cut it, ooh, and that's a fact. Oh, the kind that said will wake the dead. I like my coffee black. What more can I tell you? I'll never hold a grudge if you serve me sludge. I like my coffee black. Thank you. I'm going to do one more poem, one more song, and then I'm going to let Curt take over. This is this poem. I like this poem a lot. Well, I like all these are like my kids, you know. And every one of you has been someplace out there. If you don't have them on your ranch or your place, the neighbor has them. Those old cedar posts that just never die. They've just been there forever. And we got them up in our country. And this one actually ended up being an American Cowboy. So I thought that was kind of cool a long time ago. But it's called This Old Post. This old post was cut and cleaned and carted up the river road when my great-granddaddy was barely a shadow of the man my granddad knew. He was young, and life was free for the taking. Not free like it is today, no, sir. He drug this cedar and most of that line from many a mile away. Did it by horse, hard sweat and grit. Did it for the love of a dream. Sunk these posts around a quarter of land till his muscles set to scream, make him stop for a minute and blow a bit. But never too long for the lazy. He was never the kind to live in the minute. He could see him and cattle grazing on a section or two, and all he had to do was get these posts sunk in. Deep, solid, straight, and true. And he knew, by God, he'd win. And when he did, one post at a time, set a great live course, then rode it. And the night of his passing was felt bone deep, and the gathering clan all showed it. Now the stone we set at the head of his grave, it's moving, but it ain't near the telling of the life and love of that man like this old post right here. This old post. Thank you. And I want to end with a song that I wrote for an old friend of mine, passed away a couple years ago, George Hagee. You know George. Yeah, I know. And I was reading, this is back in the 90s, or maybe early 2000s, and I reading the Billings Gazette. You know how they got that big headline here, and then they got the, the regular ones here. And the one at the bottom, it said, Medora man has North Dakota's largest herd of longhorns. And without reading it, and I said it to the people at the table, this is going to be George Heggie. And it was. And you can back up from there till about 1983 or so. He was my dentist in Williston, North Dakota. And he's got me in the chair. He's doing whatever he's doing. And he says, I've sold my practice. He said, you're going to have to find another dentist. And I said, yeah, really? What are you going to do? Because, I mean, he was in his 50s at the time. I think, and he looked me square in the eyes and he said, D-Dub, all I've ever wanted to be is a cowboy. You know? And that would, to me, that would just set it all. And then somewhere about 93 or so, I find out about this poetry gathering thing in Medora. I go down there and find out that's what I do. And I look across the room, where it's held, and I was thinking, that looks like George Heggie in a cowboy hat. See, and he had known that I went cowboying a couple of years after that, over in Montana, and he was thinking the same thing. He said, it looks like D.W. in a cowboy hat. We met halfway across, and we were best friends all over again. But here's one for the working cowboys, whose souls just can't be pinned. They've been told way more than once, they just do not fit in. But that's okay. They ain't complaining. And if you listen to this song, you just might catch their drift. Maybe even sing along. Wouldn't it be grand riding horseback on the range of long ago? Oh, I tell you, boys, that's one thing that I know. To be roping and working cattle up and down the little moor. Oh, I believe for me that's heaven and some for sure. Riding the line when the cold wind blows, waiting for signs of spring. Railing the herd in at branding time, turning them back again out on the range. I'm never going to change. I want to be sitting in the evening around the campfires, fading glow, wishing I was a cowboy 100 years ago. Oh, it sure feels fine when the first light shines down through the coulees and draws. Hear my heart singing home, sweet home. I'll wear a coyote howls out on the range. I'm never gonna change. I wanna be sitting in the evening round the campfires, fading glow. Wishing I was a cowboy 100 years. Wishing I was a cowboy 100 years, Lord. Wishing I was a cowboy 100 years ago. For George Heggie. And thank you for putting up with my nonsense. I appreciate it. You're a great crowd. Thank you. Take care. I'd like to reintroduce you to Mike. You need to keep your hat on. This is terrible, but you can't. You're like, it's like a funeral when you go to in town, they're at the school, and all the guys take their hats off and nobody knows who they are. You get up, especially if you're in the bleachers, you can see the bald ones. Yeah. Hello.
That's why, you're too tall. You need to shrink about 4 inches, then you'll be all right.
I'm 5'8". Get off it.
Hey, let's have another hand for DW. Did a great job tonight. And glad you made the trip down.
I brought some CDs and books if anybody wants any.
Okay. He's got CDs and books if you're interested. Just talk with DW after the show here. And DW, I got a few observations before you get away too far. The old feed truck. I think it was a Dodge. That probably was. And I like my coffee black. Probably is going to be the next big hit in town here, because it's a story about life. Could be the end of your life.
Actually, I've had a lot of luck with that thing. For some reason, you ought to know this. You have breakfast clubs on the radio.
Yep.
And then some breakfast club someplace will play it for the,
Wake up in the morning.
wake up in the morning to a couple of verses, and then I get a check.
Yep.
Just about enough to buy a round.
Just about enough to get a pot of coffee.
There it is.
All right, well, thank you, DW, and he'll be around this evening. Tonight's speaker, our main speaker tonight is Curt Pate, and Curt's a stockman from Montana. He's been around. We're visiting before the show, and he's been around the same places I've been. It's just that he's probably about 3 steps ahead of me. But Curt Pate has worked with many different people throughout the cattle and livestock industry, and he's got knowledge that he's gathered through not only just studying, but also practical application and hard work. So he's going to share with us tonight some tips on livestock handling. Talk about some horsemanship, colt starting, and safety. And if you got questions, I don't know, Curt, do you want the questions at the end, or you want them as they come? Okay. I'd like to turn it over to our main speaker this evening, Mr. Curt Pate.
Thank you very much. I got to get my hat. Okay, this really makes me nervous here tonight. I got started in this world of public speaking, so to speak. Well, I grew up in the auction business. My dad was an auctioneer, and I grew up in the auction business, so I was behind the microphone a lot. And then I announced rodeos, but when I really got going in the livestock part of the world, I made my living for about 10 years starting colts for the public in 2-hour colt starting demonstrations. So I went all over the country, and I rodeoed, so it was just great. I used to ride bucking horses, and so when I would go to Dickinson, and they'd bring a colt in and say, here, ride it in 2 hours or whatever. And that was just a wonderful life for me. I really, really loved it, because you might come up and get something that was bottle raised, and it would be eating on your ears or knocking your hat off, or you might get a Mustang that never been touched, and you had to go do the deal. And in 2 hours, you've got to learn how to make some pretty big changes in an animal to get them rode and tip your hat to the crowd and do whatever. And so in that time, I really, really learned a lot about how to change an animal's mind. And I did that for about 10 years. And it was just, my kids, they grew up in a truck, and we homeschooled, and my wife went with me, and we traveled all over the country, and it was just a wonderful way to learn how to really become a better horseman, and a wonderful way to raise my family. But we went along, and for about 10, 12 years, 15 years, and I just didn't fit the horse world at the time. And I hit the horse world at just the perfect time when everybody in the world that knew nothing about a horse was getting in. And you'd go to, the first place I went was to Madison, Wisconsin. And it was a huge horse fair. And there were people there. I saw things I never even imagined could be happening with a horse. And these people, the first place I saw John Lyons. And John Lyons was a horseman that he was a master salesman. I wouldn't say he was a master horseman, but he was a master salesman. And I watched, and when I walked through that, everybody had booths. They sold all their, I won't call it junk, all their equipment. I almost call it junk. But they'd have these tables, they'd have booths, and they'd sell all this stuff. And so this John Lyons, he was real smart. He would answer people's questions and do autographs, and he had his booth his table right here, where he was sitting down. And about 3,000 people would line up, but they had to go all the way around these tables waiting to get his question answered or sign an autograph. And he had bits and spurs and videos. He had all kinds of junk lined up on there to to sell them. And he had salesmen back there, and while they were waiting their hour to get his question answered, he'd sell them a bunch of stuff. And that was the horse world. And people were willing to buy it. And you could buy a magic halter, here's what I learned out of that deal. So you could buy, one of the guys come up with the idea of selling a string. He called it a progress string. And he had this string that he made, and he'd sell it to people for 15 bucks. And you could go out and catch a horse, and you could do all this stuff. You could put it on the end of a sorting stick and make it a wand. And so I watched that, and so I never even thought about this, but so what I'd done, and I learned from that, I learned something from that. That was a valuable tool, but it wasn't worth 15 bucks, so I got me a piece of baling twine. And I've had this piece of baling twine for about 15 years. I've been packing it in the back pocket. And you can't believe how handy. So that's my handy hint for the night. Don't go buy something for a lot of money. Just pick up a piece of baling twine. You won't be tripping on it, and you'll find a good use for it. If you have dogs, you got a dog that's in trouble, it makes a dog collar. It's a perfect thing. Got a gate you need to tie up, you can do that. So that's the only thing I ever sold. And I'd give people baling twine trying to make fun of the whole deal. But I went through that for about 15 years, and I just didn't fit. I didn't fit those folks. I don't say they were wrong, the people that were trying, because they were looking for what they needed. But they needed horses that wouldn't move and wouldn't do anything so they wouldn't fall off. But the way I was raised and the way I need my horse, I need him to move and I need him to go somewhere. And I cannot stand pedaling a horse away from the barn. I'd rather hold one back going from the barn than pedal him all day. And that's how I was raised, and I think that's how a lot of you were raised. But most of those folks, they couldn't ride a horse with any life, so they learned to take all the life out of them. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. So I was in Red Bluff, California, doing horse demonstrations at the bull and gelding sale. And the guy with Purina that I was with, we were sitting in a restaurant, and there's all these cow people around me. And I said, Darryl, these are my people. I'm going to the cow side of the deal. I don't know if I can make it in the cattle handling world, but I'm going to the cow side. And the horse side, they can have all those folks that they need. And so I made a switch then, and I decided to do horsemanship and cattle handling at that time. And nobody was doing it at that time, really. So it's kind of a tough struggle. But my wife and kids are still going along, and so pretty soon my kids got big enough and they got tired. So for about 15 years, we went, and then for about 10 years, I went on my own, maybe not quite that many. And what I want to kind of talk about here is this last year, not 2019, but this last 12 months from about March till last March has been the greatest year of my life. And this colt starting and all this stuff kind of led up to it. So my wife finally says, we've had enough. For the last 10 years I've been flying. I fly lots of miles. I get on lots of airplanes, and I wasn't home very much. My wife says, we're going to get a ranch job, and you're going to stay home. We're going to be a family again. So I did. I got a good job. And some folks from back east bought a ranch in Wilsall, Montana, and I took the job and went to work for them. And I cut my speaking engagements or my cattle handling demonstrations down to about a fourth of what they were going to be for the previous years. So my wife and I are going to run this ranch, and we're going to live the life that we've always wanted to live. So my wife also last year, she's had this idea to have this event called the Art of the Cowgirl. And she's been putting it together for about 5 years. And last year was the first year, and in January, or 1st of February, she had the Art of the Cowgirl. And it's bringing gear makers, saddle makers, boot makers, silver makers, braiders from the women into the craft, and then showcasing some of the stockmanship. And then my daughter put a horse sale together, and then they had that thing called the world's greatest, or a ranch rodeo, and it's a big deal. And it was pretty successful last year. So that was great. She was happy, and I was working, and we were on this ranch, and it was big country, and I had a bunch of nice colts, and life was great. About the first week of March, she had gone and visited my daughter, and she had a real bad stomach trouble. She finally went to the doctor, and she come home, and she was pretty suspicious. And about 3 days later, we got a phone call. She had breast cancer, and it had gone to the bone. Now I'm going to tell, I told you, remember, I said it was the best year of my life. But that day wasn't the best day of my life. It was one of those days that you just got kicked in the guts. And we didn't know what to do. My wife has been a health nut for a long time. She does yoga, she teaches yoga and horsemanship. She eats, we eat real good. We used to, I hate to admit this, but my wife goes to those organic health food stores and buys that expensive stuff, and that's fine. But I've been a pretty good husband. I do pretty good. But I used to make her. I'd go to the NCBA convention or whatever, and I'd get Zoetis, and I'd get all these pharmaceutical bags. And you know, if you go to a health food store, you can't go in there. You can't get regular groceries. You got to have a bag. But I'd make my wife take those pharmaceutical bags and pack our groceries, and those people wouldn't even look at her with those things. They were scared of her. You go into a health food store with a Pfizer bag, and you're in trouble. So she's always lived healthy. And my little thoughts tonight here is when we got that news, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. So we went to the doctor, and he said probably 5 to 10 years. Boy, now that's a life changer right there. One day we've just got nothing could be better, and the next day here we go. But my wife, and my lesson here tonight is, my wife is not, she's got a lot of try. She's got a lot of try. And she doesn't go with the flow. She'll do what she needs to do. So we went to the doctor, and we believe in doctors, and we believe in all that stuff. So we got a real good doctor, and he put us on this regular old program, chemotherapy, all this stuff. And she said, well, I don't know about this. I'm not sure. And she started researching. Well, in the meantime, we went out to Seattle to go to a specialist because she was going to try to get on this trial deal that was some different thing. And when we were out in Seattle, we got released. We were coming home, and they called back, said, you got to come back to the hospital. Her kidneys shut down, and she was going to die. Her ureter had cancer, and they'd closed up, and her kidney function had quit. And so we went back and spent about 5 days in the hospital. She was in tough shape. And she had to make a decision to, her kidneys quit. So she had to get the bags put in and the tubes into her kidneys, or she was going to be poisoned. And she didn't want to do it. She says, I don't want to do this. And we said, you've got to. And the doctor said, they'll probably never come out. My wife says, we'll put them in, but they're coming out. She pointed her finger at the guy. And so we did it, and she come on, and we come home, and she was weak and tough. And she just kept working and reading and learning. And my daughter's boyfriend, H.D. Page, had heard about this wormer that was curing cancer. And so it's Panacure, it's fenbendazole. And so she started researching and going, and she went with her doctor and did what he said, but she also went on this. And she kept trying, and her health, she really, really ate well and really did a lot of things. Well, long story short, she got stronger and stronger and stronger. She did her Art of the Cowgirl again this year, and it's 3 times as big, and when she went there, the bags were out. There was no more bags. She got rid of them. And she roped, she did everything. She did real well, and she's real strong. This summer, we went, the changing point, I believe, one of the lessons that I learned, this vest right here, Agape Boys Ranch. I've been going to this Agape Boys Ranch for a few years, and it's a kind of a troubled child's place, and they have a cult starting program, and I go help them with their cults. And my wife went up there with me, and all these, she'd never been there before, and all these boys got down on their knees and prayed for her, right in front of her. And that was a spot right there that I think she went from not believing that she could beat this for those boys. And they sent her letters, and they did things, and so that was one of our lessons, prayer. So we believe in prayer and Panacure. That's 2 things that we believe in, prayer and Panacure. And we believe in modern medicine and the doctors. So we go on and we keep working, and she's doing great. She does fine. She's doing really good. Well, in the meantime, I quit my job. When she first got it, I had quit my job. And so quitting my job, because I just didn't know what was going to be, and I didn't think it'd be fair for the owners or fair for my wife. So I quit it. And so we were just kind of on coast. And then these friends of my wife's bought a guest ranch. And they asked us to come to work for them. And so we did. She was feeling good enough, and we went to work for them. And there was no cattle on the place. It was all horses. There was 50 old dude horses. And they got in kind of an argument with the folks that they bought it from, so they knew nothing about the horses. So for me, and one of the reasons it's one of the greatest years of my life is I got to take 50 head of horses that I'd never seen before, and they weren't all old dude horses, some young horses, and go through all those horses. And what I did is I became a horseman again. I didn't know their ages. I had my grandfather when I was a kid. My grandfather was a horse trader, and he taught me how to mouth horses. And I trimmed feet, and I mouthed horses, and I ribbed horses, and I learned, and I rode all the. I called my son up, and I said, "Yeah, I rode 50 horses, and not a one of them's bucked me off," because he's always getting bucked off. He says, "Yeah, Dad, they're dude horses." What do you mean? So I had a lot of fun with it, and I became a better horseman. And I really, really had a lot of time to work and get back to the basics of horsemanship. And I spent a lot of time with my wife. And the thing is, the reason I say it's one of the best years of my life is because we were living, and I was a pretty good husband. I put the toilet seat down, and I probably washed the dishes a couple times a week or something. So I was a pretty good husband, but now I'm a much better husband. I really appreciate what I've got. And hopefully some of these stories, because you never know. So hopefully some of these thoughts will get you thinking and really appreciate what you have. The other thing I learned is how good the agricultural community is. You can't believe how many people reached out and helped us and prayed for her and tried to give us money and all those things. The reason I think my wife did so well is because she took care of herself. She was in good health, and she was in good shape, and she ate right. And then she had a good attitude. And then she had the support of a lot of friends and family, and that's really, really important. So the agricultural community is a great thing. So those are some real, real good lessons I learned. But the other thing I learned, and I really do believe that we are much closer this year than we've ever been before. And it's really, really important. That's why I think it's the best year ever. But the other thing I learned is going to work for people that are not involved in agriculture and having them come into agriculture. The first place we went to work for, he had a gravel business in Atlanta, huge, had a lot of money, bought a beautiful ranch, and it was pretty nice. I got to go, the ranch is already leased for a year, so all I had to do is I went and helped these folks, and I learned about the ranch, and I just kind of got to observe for about a month. But it was real interesting for me to observe these folks. They had a plane, a Learjet, and they'd fly in there, and what they did was they brought their life from Atlanta to Wilsall, Montana, and they were missing the big picture. And I tried to tell them that, but they couldn't see it. So then the next folks that we went to work for, they're in the Wendy's business. They have Wendy's franchises. They have 140 some Wendy's franchises. So it's really kind of cool to work for somebody that's bought a ranch from the work that we've all done. And the beef quality assurance and all these stockmanship and stewardship programs, that end product, that hamburger that they're selling. So he told me that you have 40 cents of profit on a hamburger, a Wendy's hamburger. So everything, we bought a tractor. I said, man, how many hamburgers is that? So every now is in my mind is on hamburgers, how many hamburgers it took to get by this tractor. But it's so interesting, and they're really into horses. They're really into horses. The wife was, and that's the way they met, was her wife had come to some of my wife's horsemanship and yoga clinics. But they are doing the same thing. And we're still working for them now. I just left them this morning. And they come from Park City, Utah, and they bring all their crazy ideas and all their troubles from Park City, Utah to the ranch. First thing they did in Livingston, Montana, the place is about 15 miles straight up a big old mountain out of Livingston, Montana. The first thing they did is change all the locks. I said, what the hell are you changing the locks for? Now the locks don't even work right. I said, don't lock anything. That's the best way to go. If out this far, when somebody comes, they're going to break your lock, and then you're going to have to fix the lock and the door, and you're still going to get robbed. So quit doing that. But they can't understand that. Their mind is in Park City, Utah, when I'm trying to get their mind in Livingston, Montana on the ranch, and to settle themselves down and become livestock people, people of land. They talk about how environmentally friendly they are and recycling and all these things. And you can't believe how much waste there is when they leave that place. You want to see somebody that's environmentally friendly, that's a recycler? Go to my grandma that's been through the Depression. There's a recycler. There's somebody that doesn't waste anything. You see, so when I hear all these things that these people are doing to save the environment, and that the ranchers and the cows are farting and belching and all these things are causing problems, it really disturbs me about how far off they are. And how do we change that mindset? How do we change that mindset? So when I tell these people, I say, just think. And they say, well, we don't know if we want to run cows on this place. I said, why wouldn't you want to run cows in this place? I said, what was here before the cows? There was Native Americans and a lot of buffalo or bison. And there was millions of bison that came across this country. And they did a good job. And the Native Americans and the wolf kept the ecosystem going. That's what made it work. So if it was working then, why isn't it working now? What's different? We need animals to graze the grass, break down the cellulose, put it back in the ground, and bring it back on up. That's what makes this cycle go. Just because there's too much pavement and too many people driving skunk wagons, as Charlie Russell used to call them, that doesn't mean the buffalo or the cow or whoever's that making that cycle, you see. So our job here is, it's a tough one, because we got to get them to figure out that we need the cycle. I think it's really, I was reading something, and you know, I always thought the wolves kept the big old herds of buffalo moving, but they didn't. The wolf's job was to keep them bunched. And that's kind of like this mob grazing you're hearing all about. That's what the wolves, they kept them bunched, and the Native Americans kept them bunched. The reason they moved was because there was so much urine and manure that they couldn't eat it anymore, so that the whole herd would move and it would like a plowed field. And that's how that whole system worked. So it all worked together. Now, we in modern agriculture, we've got to use our stockmanship, our stewardship, to replicate what Mother Nature did to make it all work. And that's our new job. And that's where the stockmanship comes in. So as we talk a little bit about stockmanship, and that's been a passion of mine for a long time. And I look out here, and not everybody here is going to go work a cow or ride a horse or whatever, but there's some certain things that are really, really important to understand that can help through stockmanship, but also can help through what I call peoplemanship. And so the first thing that I think is real important to understand about stockmanship of any kind is we're working with the brain of the animal. And we're working with humans, we're working with the brain of the human as well. And when an animal has a cow or a horse, they have two sides of their brain. They have a thinking side of their brain, and they have a reacting side of their brain. And the job of the stockman is always to try to keep the animal on the thinking side of their brain. When you have an animal on the thinking side of the brain, we call that growth. If you're a horse trainer, if you have him on the thinking side of his brain, thinking his way out of pressure, they'll get better and better. And pretty soon you'll have a real good horse. Now, what I see with the modern day horse training, we take them to the reacting side of the brain a lot of times by putting too much pressure on. It's like when those buffalo were grazing back in the old days. When the wolf pack came in, they went from sitting there trying to pick which grass to eat that wasn't defecated on to they had to run and get away from that wolf. They went from thinking to reacting. And they might step on each other or run over the babies. You see, and I think one of the things from that time until now, animals don't like to be bunched and scared. When an animal is in the reacting frame of mind and you put them in a bunch, they hate that worse than anything. And the reason that is, with cloven hoof animals, is when you get animals bunched up, whether it be in an alley or too many predators or whatever, when they start stepping on each other's cornet bands, that panics animals and they switch from thinking to reacting quicker than anything else there is that I know. And I think that's one of those stockmanship things that I think our grandfathers knew, they maybe didn't know they knew. And then the other thing that happened when we had horned cattle, it was much harder to get them in those spots because they wouldn't get tight. They could use their horns to protect themselves to keep from getting stepped on the cornet band. And so now we have metal corrals and we have non-horned cattle and we have a lot of pressure. You remember when you were a kid, when there were wood corrals, and when you put cattle in an alley and you started hearing those corrals creak, you backed off because you didn't want to build fence. And so you took the pressure off the animal before it was too much. Now we got all these great metal fences, or really, really good cedar fences. And the cattle take the pressure. The fences can take so much pressure, the cattle have to take a lot more pressure. And so now sometimes when the human even comes out in the pasture, they automatically go from thinking to reacting if we're not careful. So you've got to be real observant of your animals and understand the thinking and the reacting side. And a good stockman, he always watches. When his animal starts putting their head up or they go, you can tell when they go from thinking to reacting, you got to take some of that pressure off. And I think that's the first part of being a good stockman. And you watch a good salesman or a good preacher or a good teacher. They know how to do that same thing. You see, they know how to take that pressure off. So there's a lot of correlation in that. So when we're talking about cattle handling or horsemanship, I say we have three kinds of pressure. Everything's about pressure. A real easy way to kind of think about working stock and making stock work is pressure. If we're going to load a cow in a trailer right here, and say that trailer is putting back 100 pounds of pressure on this cow, somehow I got to get at least 101 pounds of pressure, or a little bit more pressure, to get it to go from my pressure into that 100 pounds of pressure in the trailer. Now we can put an alley up here and then get a hot shot, and then that makes it easier to create that pressure. But if we're not careful, we're going to put too much pressure on and she's going to go from thinking to reacting. And then she'll start getting a habit. Now you can load one out in the pasture. You can load one out in the pasture, out in the big open, but you still got to get enough pressure. There's got to be more pressure out here there is in that trailer. So you might have to trot her around and work her around. Every time she looks at that trailer, you take a step back. That's called releasing pressure. And when you take the pressure off, she says, that's what I do. If I go towards the trailer, he takes the pressure off. And you teach him to take pressure and move away from pressure. But if she takes a step towards that trailer and you hurry up and try to go shut the trailer gate, there's no reward, and so she might get trickier and not get into the trailer. And that's why the less of a stockman you are, the more tools you need to create that pressure. But that's a driving pressure. And a driving pressure is probably the most used pressure we use. We drive cattle. Cattle drove from here, from Texas, clear up to here. And we're real good at driving cattle. And the better you get at putting pressure on and using a driving pressure, the better you're going to be. But there's another pressure that a lot of people use, and that's a drawing pressure. And the driving pressure works for humans, and cattle and horses, but the drawing pressure. So if you're going to move cattle from point A to point B and you've been feeding them hay, all you got to do is get the round baler and just open the gate and go in front of them. They're going to follow you. And that's a drawing pressure. And that's a real valuable pressure we can use. But the problem is, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but Bernie Sanders is trying to use a drawing pressure too. He's trying to give people something so they'll draw and vote for him. That's kind of funny. A drawing pressure. I can get a kid candy, and I can get them to come to me. So that's a drawing pressure. If we give something for nothing, we'll get a draw. And that's a good thing. It's a real positive thing unless it gets out of balance. So we want our driving pressure to be in balance. We want our drawing pressure to be in balance. And so people need that a lot. When we're dealing with people, we have to have a drawing pressure. The last pressure that's really, really important, and I think this is a pressure that a real good stockman and a real good people person understands. And that would be a maintaining pressure. A maintaining pressure. And that is the pressure that means that first of all, an animal can only think of one thing at a time. Humans, same way. So if I get up here and I get too boring, pretty soon you're going to be all looking at your cell phone or taking a nap or doing something else. So I got to maintain your interest through enough action or enough stimulus with your brain to keep you thinking rather than reacting and getting mad at me like my dumb joke just happened. That didn't work very good. So I got to maintain a presence with you. And the maintaining pressure is really, really important. When you're riding a horse, we used to ride colts, my family and I, and my wife and my kids would be riding, and they'd be talking and visiting and not paying attention to their horses, and pretty soon their horses would be winning for other horses. And mine wouldn't. And they'd say, why aren't your horses winning and ours are? I says, because mine, I'm keeping them just busy enough where they've got to be thinking about me. They can't be thinking about their buddies. And that's real important to keep that maintaining pressure. And the same thing with people. You've got to keep a maintaining pressure. You've got to be interesting enough, but not belligerent to where you send somebody away, but you keep their mind with you. So driving, a drawing, and a maintaining pressure are real important. I never have used a PowerPoint. I just don't work that way. But I have a hat. And that's why I wanted to get my hat. I kind of wanted to get to my toothpick because I got some of that meat still stuck in my teeth. But that wouldn't be very good. But I really think over the last few years, we've really come a long way with cattle handling and the teaching of cattle handling. I think back, and when you think back, how did you learn how to work cattle? If you were with your dad or your mother or your grandpa or grandma, it wasn't like, okay, now you get to the balance point there and don't get in the flight zone and all those things. It was just when you were in the wrong spot, they said, get out of there. And probably not that nice, probably. And then if you were a husband, then you got the look, which I've gotten a lot of times. So nobody really knew how to teach this. Nobody really took the time. There are lots of good stockmen in this world, horsemen and cattlemen and sheepmen or whatever, but they never knew how to explain it. So you just had to make mistakes, get yelled at, and then go through it. And if you were lucky, you might have had somebody that would help you and could really explain some things, more with the horsemanship probably than the cattle handling. So in the last 15 years, Temple Grandin has really come up with some great, great teaching tools. And then Lisa Peterson has been a great ambassador for stockmanship and BQA. But we've learned how to teach it. But the thing is, to teach it out of a textbook, it doesn't work. All it can do is get you started. So understanding flight zone. We've all heard of flight zone. And the word is, when you get in the flight zone, the animal flees. Well, that's a good thing to learn, but that's very basic. And if you penetrate the flight zone and the animal flees, well, then you just made him afraid, and you've probably taken him from thinking to reacting a little bit. So let's change that and think of it as pressure zone. So this is a cow here. My hat's a cow. And so when a cow or a horse or a buffalo, the best place to learn about stockmanship for a young person is get them good at catching horses. If a person is good at catching a horse, especially a hard to catch horse, first of all, they're thinking way ahead of the horse, and they understand the drive, the draw, and the maintain. Because when you go to catch a horse, you know, when you're a kid, you hide your stuff behind your back, and you got the grain, and then they get one bite of grain, and they take off, and you throw the grain bucket at them, and then you throw the halter, and it's just, that's a deal. But once you start learning how to catch a horse, then you're on your way to the right pressure. The boy that's he likes to ride, so we ride every day when he's there. But he goes at his horse, and it just frustrates me so bad the way he approaches his horse, because he's sending him off. And I worked for 3 months getting their horses good to catch, and then in 2 days they've got them so hard to catch that you can't get them caught anymore. He just doesn't understand that feel when you approach a horse. So he'll walk out there like that with his hand out to go pet him, and the horse runs off, and you'll think, geez, he's hard to catch. And it's just, he just doesn't understand the proper pressure. And that's a driving pressure. He doesn't know it, but he's driving that horse away. So what I try to do is understand here. So pressure zone, an animal thinks of one thing at a time. So when we go to catch a horse or move a cow, he's got his head down, he's eating. At some point, as I approach him, if I'm riding a horse and I'm going to come up to a bunch of yearlings, at some point, he's going to change his mind from the grass to me. And that is the pressure zone. That's what I look for. That's the pressure zone. I set my alarm, so if I didn't want to go too long here. So as I approach my horse, now, when I'm approaching a cow or whatever, the flatter the angle you go, the less pressure you create. So if I was going to try to get up to a bunch of yearlings, and they were grazing right here, I would act like I was riding over to Gene here, and I'd ride right by these cattle. Now my angle is real flat. They're going to change their mind from the grass to me, but they're going to pick me up, and they're going to pick their head up and want to look at me with 2 eyes. And if I'm going straight at them, they're thinking I'm coming, they're going to try to move out of my way. And if they're kind of flighty or wild, they're going to hurry up and get far enough away from me so they can turn around and look at me with 2 eyes. So when you approach an animal and you're trying to figure out where that pressure zone is, or you're going to go catch a horse, if you walk straight at them, you're going to tell them to leave. If you flatten your angle out, the flatter your angle, the less pressure you're putting on, the less driving pressure. So if you have a real gentle horse, a kid's horse, you can walk right straight up to him. If you have a colt or something that hasn't been caught too much, you might want to slow down and take a different angle. The other thing that's important to remember, when cattle or horses are a little bit flighty or suspicious of a human, they want to see you with the left eye. They want you to come to them on the left side. Now, a lot of you have seen this for a long time, right? You guys know this. Not because of science, but because you've caught a lot of horses. And when you go up to a horse that's afraid of you, or a cow, just think about counting real snorty cattle out. They want to go by you on the left eye. They're easier to get to come by you on the left eye than the right eye. There's a reason for that. Remember before I was talking about the brain, the thinking side of the brain, the reacting side of the brain? Well, the left eye is tied to the reacting side of the brain. The right eye is tied to the thinking side of the brain. Now, it seems just the opposite. It seems like you should be able to approach them from the right eye, so they'd be in the thinking side of their, but what they want to have their mind, they want to have their mind in gear to leave. So they want to see you come up from the left side, so that they're already ready to leave when you get there. Very interesting, isn't it? Now that was something that I'm sure our grandfathers knew and the Native Americans knew and all these people knew, but now science is telling us that it's true. So it's real, real important. See, the only way you can learn that is to slow down and think. Slow down and think and observe things. And that's why the old timers had such an advantage over us, because they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have too many tasks to do. And then when they got done with the job, they sat down and they thought about it, or they observed their horses. We hear all these stories about these great horsemen, Tom Dorrance and all the great things he did. My wife's grandmother, who's 97 or 98 this year, she was sitting at the kitchen table telling me a story. She said, yeah, my dad he was a horse trader. He had about 100 head of horses all the time. And we kept 2 night horses in at night, and then we'd kick those horses out. And it was us kids' job to go get the horses in. Well, somebody left a gate open, and all the horses got out. The night horses got out. So she went to find the horses, and I think she was 11 years old. She went out and found the horse herd. The only one she could catch was a 3-year-old that had never been ridden before. She climbed on him and brought the horse, 100 head of horses in on that horse. And her dad saw him coming over the hill, and she was just going with the bunch, I guess. And he said, well, if you can do that, you might as well start starting colts now. And she started starting colts when she was 11. But can you imagine a kid doing that these days? I can. My kids would have, and a lot of your kids would have too. It's just what they do. But just having that mindset to go ahead and just do it and learn. So the flatter the angle, horses, cows, they want to see you at 2 eyes. So when you're approaching an animal, if you want them to trust you or get trusting you, let them pick you up at 2 eyes. Let them see you at 2 eyes, and then they'll tell you which side to go to. And so as you approach an animal, the pressure zone, instead of the flight zone, let's call it a pressure zone. So as I'm approaching, this animal picks its head up. When he picks his head up, I've changed his mind. Now I got to stop and just give a moment's hesitation. That tells that animal, this guy reads me, he feels me. And then I can go on. And then the animal tells me where to go. And that's where you establish that pressure zone. But this is the spot in my hat, right here, where the brim is turned up here. Right here is a spot that the animal wants us. That's where a cow or a horse wants you. Right where the flattened part of my brim is, of my Greeley works hat. And that's because they can see you with both eyes. And when an animal can see you with 2 eyes, he has depth perception. When they don't trust you, they want to see you with 2 eyes. Where the human wants to be, and where we've been trained to be, I saw it today when we went to get through that line. We all got in behind each other and followed each other up. Where we go right straight in behind each other. When you all drove here tonight, you all got in the middle of the road and you drove right up the middle of the lane, right in behind each other. Everything we do in our human world tells us to get right here and follow people up. That's how our society works. When you go start working cattle, that's the exact place they don't want you to be. Right where my brim is up and that Greeley hat works and the 63 brand is on there, that's where the human wants to be, but that's where the cow doesn't want you to be. But we get there. And sometimes we have to get there. But watch a border collie dog that doesn't have somebody telling him everything to do. What do? They go from here to here. They go back and forth over here. They're going from the left eye to the right eye to the left eye, back and forth. Pretty soon that animal can't keep track of him. He says, well, I better go straight forward so I can get far enough out there to turn around and look at him with both eyes. And that's how a border collie gets an animal to go straight. We humans, we get right in behind him here, and I walk in, and now this animal can't see me. I'm hiding behind his tail. And he starts turning his head to look at me. And if you're riding a horse that's run away, what do to slow him down? Bend him. So if you want your cows to go and you get straight in behind them and they start turning their head, you're just taking the movement out of them. You're slowing their feet down by being straight in behind them. So we want to be either here or here. You don't ever really want to be straight back behind them. Now, what I think is, see, the animal wants us up here. We want to be back here. The best place for us to kind of have a happy medium is right where my brim is turned up here. This is the best spot to be. As it comes back farther, I can create more movement, but I have less control. So the side of the horse, the side of the cow, is the place to be. That's why we have round pens for working horses. When you start working a colt with a round pen, you're actually working on his side. And if you want the animal to go faster, you walk towards his tail and move in and put pressure. If you want to slow the animal down, you come up his side, and he starts slowing his feet down. Why does he do that? See, if you read all the cattle handling stuff that Bud Williams has brought out, and a lot of people that talk about his stuff, they say when you go with the movement of cattle, it slows their feet down. When you go against the flow, it speeds them up. That's what everybody says. There's he's a good stockman, he's a good teacher. And he's been telling me that for years. And I asked him one day, I says, Tom, why? Why do they slow down when you go with the flow of movement? And he changed the subject. But I wouldn't let him off the hook. I said, no, Tom, why? Why do they slow down? He didn't know. He just heard somebody else say it. But it's important to know why. And the reason it is when you start coming up a horse's side or a cow's side, they start slowing their feet down so they can turn to look at you with the other eye. They want to see you with that outside eye. So they start anticipating that and they slow down. Now, if they're real wild, what they're going to do is they're going to go faster and get out there far enough to turn around and look at you with 2 eyes. But if you'll come up an animal's side, and that's why in a round pen you can get an animal to hook on. You come up here, and just as they start to turn their head, you can step back out here, and you'll draw that animal right to you. And that's where we get a drawing pressure without a bucket of feed. You can draw that animal to you. And you can do the same thing. Say I was going to rope a yearling here, and I wanted to, I didn't want to run him out across pasture, because at this time of year, you go to run an animal out across pasture, you're going to hit a piece of ice and you're going to break your leg. So I want to just put a hula hand on him or something. So I can draw this animal, I can ride up here and get him to turn his head and look at me, put a loop on him, go to my horn without having to move. You see, so that's the drawing pressure could be very helpful to you. But if you just ride up behind him here and go to swinging your rope, you're going to have to go. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but maybe not when it's icy ground. That's a sure way to break a leg. So there's a lot of different applications of these things. So when you go with the flow of an animal, go up his side, they would tend to slow down. When you go against the flow, they want to speed up a little bit. And that, I totally agree with that, but it's important to understand why. So when you start moving your cattle and you're going to trail them somewhere, just see how much effect you can have by taking 4 or 5 steps forward. You'll start slowing your bunch down. And then you'll start understanding why you lose movement on your cattle when you're trailing them quite a ways. You see, the other thing that's really, really important, understanding about moving cattle, when you have more than one animal, they actually create the movement. So when this animal here, like if I had 7 head of cattle here in this corner, and I wanted to move them over to that corner, most people want to go in behind these cattle and just start shoving them over to that corner. And then you're in behind them again, you're out of order. So in my mind, what I would do is I would try to straighten all those cattle out, get them all looking towards that corner. That would be the first job. Get them all lined out, straightened out, looking towards the corner. Then they create their own movement. Because what happens is this animal here, he moves up and pushes on this one. And then this animal moves up and pushes on the next one, and as he steps forward, he draws this one forward. And I call it the domino effect. You create your own movement with the movement of the cattle. And movement creates movement. So there's so much to this stockmanship, but it's all about the drive, the draw, and the maintain. And the same thing with the humans. If you're dealing with people, if you learn how to put a driving pressure on, a drawing pressure, and a maintaining pressure, you'll create some real nice relationships with your family, your children, your neighbors, and the people you do business with. But if that pressure is wrong, just like working cattle, you'll be out of balance and you'll have to do some things to fix it. And so I really, really think it's important. And the big lesson I learned, I was at the NCBA convention. I've been going to there for many, many years. And I ran into a fella, Jason Van Tassel. I worked for him over at Parker Ranch in Hawaii for a couple months. And he got teary-eyed on me. He said, I love this business. And the reason I love this business is because of the people in this business. And he's right. He's really right. The people in this room, the people in this state, the people in this country that are involved with agriculture, especially with animals, they're different. Because of that, I think they understand the drive, the draw, and the maintain better than other folks. And so we're in a real lucky spot. And that's why I say this is the best year of my life. I got a good job. I got a real good wife. And we're living life better now than ever before because of a little thing called cancer. She's in remission, by the way. Yeah, the doctor the other day said she's in remission, yeah. So prayers and panicure. And I really think she's helped a lot of people. We don't know if it's a panicure or the letrozole, which is a drug that the doctor gives her, or the prayers. We don't know. We don't care. We're taking them all. And if it's just because of everything in our head that we think she's getting healed, that's fine. But she's helped a lot of people. And a lot of people have come to her, and a lot of people are coming to this website, mycancerrocks.org. And it's something to sure look at. So, I don't know. It's a very interesting life we live in. And just when we think everything's going our way, things might change. But just like when you're loading those cattle on the truck, you can't really change the way they act. You can just change the way you react to the way they act. And that's how life is. So hopefully that'll give you some things to think about and maybe be proud of, be a part of this cow business and horse business and whatever we are. But we're sure lucky folks. And get good at telling our story. Get good at telling our story. And I don't really know if we can change much. That's why I leave that to the associations, the smart people, the Lisas and the NCBA and whoever you believe in to tell our story. Let's all us just do our job. Raise beef, raise horses. Keep this ecosystem going with our grazing practices. Let them all fight and bicker and do that other stuff. Let's just do our job and live life and get the best out of it. So, questions, comments? Yeah, thanks. That's good enough. I tell you, when you open the round pen and you step in with a colt and he's snorting and blowing both, it's easy to figure out what to do there. You just go to it and you talk. Somebody says, somebody asked me one time, how do you talk so much and work? And I said, well, my dad's an auctioneer, my mom's a woman, so I kind of come by it naturally. So that's, but it's easier to talk. There's a horse out there to talk about. So anyway, hopefully it was worth your time to come in, and I sure enjoyed the night. Thank you.
Big thanks to everybody attending tonight. Big thanks to our speaker, Curt Pate, and thanks DW Groethe. Really appreciate these guys coming out. And, you know, Curt mentioned one thing about telling a story of agriculture. There's always a story. Sometimes that story gets twisted and turned the wrong way. So it's always important to remember when you're telling your story of agriculture, tell it the way you feel it, the way you live it. So let people know what's going on. And sometimes you have to correct them a time or two or three. But tell your story. And the Chamber of Commerce Ag Committee, big thanks to everybody on the committee this evening. And if you'd like, DW, I think, is going to pull up a keg of nails and be around here if you want to stop and visit. Curt's here for a bit, too. So go ahead and feel free if you want to visit with each other and spend some time here. Go ahead. And thank you for coming tonight. From everybody at the Chamber of Commerce and the sponsors that brought you tonight's Ag Livestock Forum.